broadcast. All right, we're live. Hopefully, if StreamYards lets us do that. Welcome to TNT Live. Thanks everyone for liking, sharing, clicking all the buttons. And today we are going to try and stop this from becoming China. We have the lockdowns in Shanghai, and we got Trudeau studying central bank digital currencies. We got some leadership race stuff. Now, if you're wanting a breakdown of the Bitcoin conference, that we're going to be doing on Twitter at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 7 p.m. Alberta time. And I don't know what time that would be in India, but it doesn't matter because it's illegal to watch the show in India now. Okay, no, it isn't. So where should we start today? I think biggest news is we'll talk about, I think, the Trudeau government and its new budget and some of the crazier things in it. And then the fascinating fact that no one's talking about the Shanghai lockdowns. I think that's pretty crazy.
Well, yeah, like people are talking about them, but it's not exactly getting the sort of mainstream coverage you'd want something that insane to be getting.
So it's like, no, it's like our followers on Twitter, like the people in the chat would be like, yeah, I'm talking about it and I'm mad about it. And like, of course. And we'll talk about it, but of course. But, you know, you're not seeing the Toronto Star. You're not seeing Justin Trudeau or Christopher Freeland. There's no, Europe. There's no virtue signaling of end the Shanghai lockdowns. And the one thing that's really interesting with the Shanghai lockdowns, I find, is like, why is China doing it? Like, they don't care about the lives of their citizens at all. So why do they need to, like, lock down in incredibly insane ways? Like, China or the CCP cares about the CCP's image, right? And, they understand that Western media and leaders are stupid. So they know when they say China has zero COVID, we've cured COVID, and everyone in China loves China. Then the CBC goes, well, new report, China has no COVID cases and everyone in China loves China, according to this official organization called the Chinese government. La, 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 la. I'm Rosemary Barton, and I'm a brain dead idiot. Yeah.
I was going to say, I could see it being something where it's sort of like a Hong Kong situation, although, of course, they've always controlled Shanghai, that there's a little bit too much talk of freedom going on around the city. So, well, what happens if we plunge everyone into a deep lockdown again over COVID numbers that are pretty much probably everywhere else in the country? And again, you can't lock down your way out of COVID, but they're just purely doing this to kind of lock down talk of freedom. Because like there's no good optics coming out of this, even if the mainstream media does not cover it. It looks pretty terrible. Although the Chinese government can rely on, if a story has to do with China and killing dogs, there will be no talk about it in legacy media.
Yeah, I mean I just don't get why they went this crazy, because they don't care about the lives of their citizens. You don't care.
I think that's what they're trying to prove to a certain extent to their own citizens.
Yeah, maybe they're trying to, but I think their citizens get it. I think to me, it's like, don't they run the risk of some dummies in the West waking up and saying, oh my God, the Chinese Communist Party is actually bad. Right?
I just mean that there is more activity in Shanghai of people saying the CCP is insane, this is ridiculous. And the more the CCP hears about that, the more they're likely to lock people down just to prove who's still in charge, kind of a thing. Where it's like if there was like a freedom rally in Hong Kong, you like there's probably a curfew for like 6 months. And that's why I'm saying might be happening in Shanghai, where it has nothing to do with COVID. They're just using an excuse to sort of show people that they can do whatever they want to them if they start talking about getting rid of the CCP.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Like, yeah, maybe that could be it. It's like sending a message to the rest of mainland China that, hey, F around, find out is kind of the thing. Maybe I just don't know why they just didn't let COVID run through, and if people die, just say no, they died from seeing, maybe they could just say, though, they died of homosexuality, and Disney would be like, oh, great, we're going to sign a contract with you, because this is my favorite thing of the Disney thing, to kind of go off topic, because I love how Disney would be like, we need to stand for LGBTQQQQ SS+, but we're going to edit all of that out of China. The Chinese cut is how soon until like really Christian American families are taking the dubbed over Chinese versions of Disney cartoons? That's an interesting
there's like 3 dubs over one movie just to watch it without the random gender propaganda in the middle of it.
The English translated to Chinese, then dubbed back into English. for the non-transgender content.
I just love the way that large corporations do that. They'll sort of pimp out the fact that we got the first openly gay Disney character or something like that, and then you watch the Chinese one, you're like, well, he's just a little effervescent. Just settle down, guys.
That'll simmer down there, youngin. Yeah, so that's interesting. The other thing I think we should transition off this is like the stuff that they're doing there is sort of where the future can go if the liberals kind of get their way. And I know, people might be, oh, this is hyperbolic, blah, 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 blah. How dare you compare the Chinese government to the Canadian government? And yes, we're not saying that Justin Trudeau is just as bad as Xi Jinping, but the institutions that we're setting up right now have the potential to lead Canada down a pathway where things like the Shanghai lockdowns can happen. And one of the things that is interesting in the Shanghai lockdowns is they're having drones. So like computerized drones are going out and scanning people's faces. If you step out on your own balcony and the drone scans your face without a mask, they will automatically fine you. And they can automatically fine you because China has digital currency or CBDCs. And they are, of course, a social credit system. And this is the type of stuff that could happen in Canada if we go to fully digital CBDC currencies, which are completely different than currencies like Bitcoin. Now, to go into the full, like, if you want to know more about Bitcoin, I guess we'll plug this now. Like, in terms of if you want to know about the Bitcoin conference, we're actually hosting a Twitter space later tonight. So Twitter Space, the National Telegraph, is hosting one at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's 7 p.m. Alberta. There's a National Telegraph Twitter page. You can follow that. A special guest will be Benjamin Dichter, who is the spokesperson for the Freedom Convoy. So if you have any questions about Bitcoin, the Freedom Convoy, Bitcoin Conference, all that, we're going to do a whole Twitter Space that's more interactive. We like being that. So that will be at 9 p.m. tonight. So we're just going to do a standard TNT Live here. But if you want to sort of interact, do a Twitter Space with us, ask questions to Ben Dichter, to me, or Wyatt's going to be covering the Polyev conference. So we're going to have our Bitcoin finance expert or columnist, Neil Mackenzie Suter. He'll be controlling one of the accounts. So that'll be at 9 p.m. tonight.
I just want to quickly go back to for the whole CBDC thing and us sort of talking about and even naming the episode after, like, Trudeau importing CCP, authoritarianism, or whatever I specifically named it this time. Like, just like our last episode, it's never saying that Justin Trudeau has the exact same powers as Xi Jinping and he's like a dictator like Mao and he's going to try and kill tons of people. It's more so that Justin Trudeau seems willing to act as dictatorial as the current Canadian system allows him to be, or he'll even sort of stretch the boundaries of the power that he's given in order to try and do as much as he wants. And that's kind of what I think the CBDC thing represents. Of course, he can't exactly bolt people into their homes the way that the CCP regime in China does. But he will try and push forward things like CBDCs in order to gain more control over being able to track and regulate the spending of citizens in the country. And of course, some people talk about CBDCs like, oh, it's just the same as credit cards. The government already has control over your money. They were able to freeze the money of truckers and their supporters. While that's true, it has to be sort of done in a backwards way. You have to do it in sort of a backwards way where they had to basically put pressure on banks during the Freedom Convoy for them to shut down people's accounts, or specifically sue someone or charge them in order to signal to banks they wanted that person's account shut down. Whereas with the CBDC, the government would flat out just have control to the back end of your bank accounts and could just shut it down whenever they wanted for whatever reason, because to a certain extent, it's just their bank account at that point.
Yeah, and it sort of takes the link off, and it's sort of the erosion of these metrics. And it's interesting, CBDCs would eliminate the need for standard banks like TD or RBC, but you're not substituting it something better. You're just having, then in full control of your money is the Bank of Canada, the Canadian government, and maybe the IMF or whatever global finance organization, it's Christine Lagarde or Klaus Schwab would be able to get into your bank account. And it's another thing where it's just so easy to do. Like it's a push of a button. There's no checks and balances of the institution. So with with people's bank accounts getting frozen, there's a lot of under the table talk that it was actually the banks that put pressure on the Trudeau government to overturn the Emergencies Act. Now, the banks aren't the heroes here. They went through with the orders without questioning. They broke sort of the sacred trust of, hey, we won't freeze your bank accounts without a court order. They did that without a court order, but because it was, by some regards, from the start of the invocation of the Emergencies Act till the end of it, $1.4 trillion in capital left Canada. And there was a run on the banks. TD lost $8.5 billion in market share. So the banks kind of realized, oh my God, this is kind of terrifying if we keep going down this. But with CBDCs, well, you can take out the banks and sort of everyone just has an account with the Bank of Canada. And there's a lot of things they could do. So like, there's a lot of ways we need to stop it. But, just having cash won't be enough to stop it. Like, again, I've pulled a lot of money out of the banks and keep it in hard assets or cash or whatever these days. Like, I'm with you. But the problem is, if you institute CBDCs, what I would think they were likely to do is they would just outlaw cash. But there would be a grace period of 2 years, and it would probably start with they go with the carrot over the stick. You'd probably get a deal that, hey, whatever cash you deposit into CBDCs, we'll give you 20% extra in your money. So with the economy going to hell, or let's say 20, 50%, whatever it is, you put $2,000 or you put $1,000 of hard cash that you've kept. Well, you put that back into your bank account. We give you $1,200 in Canadian digital money.
I don't even think you have to do that. You could probably just do it where every single time a small business or large business gets in a bunch of cash, like every business, they wrap it up, they send it into the bank, they deposit it into their account, and the government can just take that and then just burn it. So because the money's now being digitally managed, so every single time money gets spent and it gets deposited in the bank, which the vast majority of people are going to do. A lot of people aren't going to react to this and say, I'm going to start hoarding cash, and every time I get $1, I'm not going to give it to the bank. I'm just going to hold it as cash. Eventually, they'll get 99% of the money back. It won't take that long. It'll just be a few years, and you won't really see that much cash left.
Yeah, I mean, that they could do a lot of things, right? Because I just think I think they'd want to get cash off the market pretty quickly, so people just stop accepting it. Yes, they would do things like every time time you would use cash for a mainstream transaction in this new economy, it would be the last time physical cash would be used in the economy. I do think, however, to avoid people hoarding cash or keeping it in use for off the book transactions, there would be some sort of reward to handing in your cash, at least at the beginning. Like, you can gain an extra 10% if you're converting cash to digital money, just so people have the incentive to go willingly hand in their cash, and it's not like the government forced you to do it. So it's basic human psychology. Now, I'm assuming the government has a brain, which is not the case. No one in government has any brain, but it's human psychology that if you willingly buy into something, you're more likely to support it in perpetuity. Like, oh, I gave my money up, even if you were getting a little reward. It's like, oh, I like the system, I did it. So it gets you to buy in. Whereas if they sort of go around seizing your cash or forcing you to hand it in, and you reluctantly hand it in, you're like, oh, then you mistrust it. But if it's like, yay, I give in my cash and I get more in CBDC money, I think it would be more likely.
And you were on Richard Serrett's show recently from Mississauga, and I think that you made a good point when you mentioned the fact that by basically giving out free money for people to adopt the system, the way that actually the Chinese government does, both in its own country and the areas it's sort of slowly rolling out CBDCs, as well as African countries where they're trying to get people on the digital yuan. By giving people money, you can just jack up the approval rating of the system before you've done anything authoritarian. And of course, people like free money, and people don't really think of the implications. So then you had a poll out there that says it turns out 80% of people like $200 of free money. Ergo, they like the system. And by doing so, you tend to push the message that this is a good thing for even the 20% of people who are still unsure, or even people who don't realize the implications. So it I guess creates a false unity that we all like this, because remember that all the polling that came out saying that we liked it, even though it's a false pretense.
Yeah, and it's polling, it's studies. Like for the people who want sort of clarification here, what the government has put in the budget, the Liberal government has put, is they're going to start a study on central bank digital currencies and if they work. And the way the government
government has never spent money on researching something it didn't absolutely want to implement. Trudeau's never pushed out a terrible idea and heard back about it, and you're like, I guess we're not going to do it.
Yeah. So my favorite example of this is, what I was telling me, the way they studied injection sites, free injection sites. So what they did in these different places is they would, have safe injection sites. And what they would do is they'd hand out free heroin to heroin addicts. And then they would poll the heroin addicts of did they like getting free heroin? And would you believe it? But people addicted to heroin like getting free heroin. So there's no cultural impact of, how did it affect the wider society, blah, 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 blah. They just asked the heroin addicts, do you like free heroin? And they were like, yeah, this is pretty sweet. Give me more heroin. And then the government's like, success. We succeeded with the free injection sites. Everyone's happy, right? Now, this will be what they'll do with CBDCs is they'll give a bunch of free digital money to some poor people in like northern Alberta, northern Saskatchewan, whatever, wherever, and then they'll ask them at the end of it, did you enjoy getting free money? Do you think having free money is good? And they'll say yes, right? This is the studying for universal basic income, right? Universal basic income is great if there's 100 people getting universal basic income, so you're getting it. The world doesn't get it. The people around you, there's no inflation in your society or your community because everyone's getting free currency. You just get free money. You get $15,000 free, and you're like, oh, this is great. Right. So it allows you to go, oh, free money is good without the consequences of dumping money into the economy.
And I think one of the other issues with CBDCs is once the government has control over everything that you spend and they know what you're spending money on, and they've kind of integrated all businesses and products and types of services into the system of recognizing different things, they can then tax you at the source of payment for like you filled up your truck twice this week. Well, you're going to have to pay 10% more the second time you do it because that's a behavior we don't like.
Yeah.
The problem is although that sounds insane and a lot of people should find that insane, there's enough people out there that already kind of act within the government sort of the sort of range that the government would want people to act within. Like in terms of purchasing different products and acting certain ways, that a lot of people will think, well, this system's fantastic because I'm part of like the 35% that it benefits. And then there's another 15% who could kind of care less, even if it does negatively affect them. So you can kind of, out of terrible policy, cobble together enough approval and indifference where the minority of people, even though their feeling against the system is way stronger than the people in favor of it, you get it to the point where enough people will tend to vote for it to continue like a pace. And that's one of the sort of stupid things with a lot of other types of policy. There's tons of policies out there where the people who it benefits are willing to keep voting in favor of it, so you never get rid of it, even though it's actually potentially even a negatively affecting 60% of people, because you don't need that many people coming out to vote in favor of something to keep it around, even if it's super unpopular. It's like rent control. Rent control is terrible for housing affordability. If you already happen to be in an apartment that was arbitrarily put under rent control.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And like what you really hit on there is the real danger of CBDCs is the behavioral modification they can put on a society by rewarding or unrewarding different things. So yeah, the yuppie Torontoite who is an NDP supporter and owns a bike and doesn't really have a car. Well, it's great. They're taxing they're taxing people who can't fill up their gas thing. But if you work in like rural Saskatchewan and you need to drive to work like an hour or so, or do things and your kids like live down there and you're on a farm, like you're going to blow through your fuel requirements pretty quickly. And then you're going to be penalized. And the problem with CBDCs is every single purchase you make is tracked and controlled. So maybe they won't ban you. They'll do Canada's a free country. We won't ban you from buying gas, but every liter you buy that's over, let's say the 50, you're allowed to buy 100 liters per month or some. Let's just make a random number, right? You're limited to 100 liters per month, right? And what China would do is just cut you off out 100 liters. But what the Liberals would do is each liter after 100 liters, gets 25% more expensive. And then you blow past 115, it's even more expensive. So they price you out of doing different things. And, there's certain people who need to pay for gas for work and they get screwed over, right? The other famous thing is they hate red meat because they're idiots. So very soon there could be not so much a hard limit on red meat, although they could institute, if you have CBDCs, you could institute a limit on meat. The more likely thing they do is just make it more expensive after a certain point, at least to start. And then, once we get to Justin Trudeau Jr., the third Trudeau with all of this, well, then things start to become illegal because you've eroded the charter so much after you institute CBDCs that you can pretty much.
I think people also have to realize that even regardless of you're on the left or the right, it is extremely tempting to want people to basically follow your own ethical code. And who cares if the government has to exert a little bit of power as long as I can get people doing X every week. And that's something that I think people need to sort of think of as well. It's not just that you can tell people, well, don't you know this is going to put controls over your lives? A lot of people will demand those controls because they wish people acted more like them. Yeah,
that's another problem is we don't have a culture, especially in Canada, of people willing to stand up to authoritarianism. We have this again, a bit of it is the American inferiority complex, where Americans are always talking about freedom, so Canadians, despite Americans, will be well, we can have less freedom, and that makes us smarter than the Americans. It's whatever whatever nonsense that goes on through all of that faulty reasoning. You're right that there has to be a way to explain it to people. So there's a lot of people. We were at the Bitcoin conference, and again, if you want to know more about the Bitcoin conference, we're running a Twitter space after this at 9 p.m. Eastern time. A lot of Bitcoiners get it. Bitcoiners get it because Bitcoin is totally anonymous and decentralized. No one can track your Bitcoin purchases. So Bitcoin is the exact opposite of a CBDC. They're both internet money in a way, but Bitcoin and central bank digital currencies are the exact opposite. No one can track your Bitcoin. Bitcoin is total freedom money. Bitcoin eliminates essentially the need for the banks because everyone can become their own bank. And, with the Lightning Network, you can make transactions at the speed of credit cards, and it's totally untraceable for the most part. CBDCs are totally traceable, centrally controlled digital money. So they're very different. And, I understand the hesitation towards Bitcoin. I had hesitation towards Bitcoin for the longest time. I didn't get into it until I saw what happened at the Freedom Convoy and the fact that, the Bitcoin was able to defeat government nonsense. So, one of the things I'm just sort of going through out loud, because we have an audience here with us, is for the Bitcoin skeptics. What is your big fear over CBDCs and Bitcoin? Because we want to stop the central bank digital currency. The National Telegraph, we're putting together sort of a plan to do so, but we don't want to just be this is only for Bitcoiners and the Bitcoiners will stop it. I think we need a good marriage between people who are into cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, and all that, and against the central government, and the people who are rightfully skeptical of all this internet stuff.
That was nothing. It was just a stupid comment I wanted. I like how BL is just roasting me in the YouTube chat, and I love it. He called me. He called me Megamind 20 minutes ago if I took off my glasses, and I can't disagree. I just like the fact that someone's taking this much time and attention to roast me while this whole thing's going on.
Yeah, Wyatt's great. By the way, Wyatt now owns a pair of shorts, everyone, so he's totally off his rocker. Here's a good one. Does Bitcoin pay you interest or have an investment portfolios that you earn money? So right now, no, not really. Bitcoin is not. Bitcoin is essentially a currency. Not people tend to see it as an investment, but it's more of a currency. So you can maybe there'll be in a future they're talking about Bitcoin bonds. There will be programs where you can take bonds out in Bitcoin and get interest in there. But Bitcoin's essentially holding a type of currency. It's it's like having not a bank account, but it's like having $10,000 in USD just in my pocket. That doesn't earn cash, but the appeal of Bitcoin, as Bitcoiners would say, is Bitcoin's a deflationary asset. So there's less than there's only going to be 21 billion Bitcoins in the world.
Million.
So you don't need to sort of gain interest on your money the same way you do with fiat currency, because fiat currency is constantly devalued as more and more money is printed, right? So that makes sense. As the supply of the money increases, the value of it goes down. Whereas Bitcoin is a very scarce resource that is deflationary. So in a sense, your Bitcoin is designed that just holding it in itself would gain value. So you don't really need these saving incentives if you own Bitcoin, if Bitcoin's adopted as a central reserve currency. Can Bitcoin become real coins that I can hold? No, I don't think so.
Purpose. It
would defeat the purpose. It's this hard wallet, whatever. So because saying yes, you can stake your crypto and make more ways than the banks can. So again, we're not Bitcoin experts. We're just trying to get into it. But I have heard of Bitcoin bonds, and there are ways to do it. I just don't want to give anyone cryptocurrency or Bitcoin investing advice, because we are
it's like any other currency. If you were to buy it, assuming that another currency, it would become more valuable against other currencies. It's just the same principle, pretty much. If you think it's going to become more valuable, I guess buy it if you're looking to invest. But the whole point is, at the end of the day, it's a monetary tool where you can have more confidence in it than something like the euro or the Canadian dollar or the American dollar, because they are literally barred from having any more than 21 million Bitcoins. And there's smaller units of Bitcoins, and it's not quite like dollars and cents, because Satoshis, there's like 1 million Satoshis per Bitcoin. There's 21 million Bitcoin. So it's a little bit different. I just want to go to this comment someone said, is like, what if the government shut down the internet? How do you go get around that? Well, that's pretty impractical for the government to have to do, to shut down the internet in order to stop people from using Bitcoin. Plus, it's like, if they're shutting down internet to your house, well, do you have a phone with data? Well, you can access your Bitcoin. Can you drive a car and drive to somewhere where there is internet? Well, you can still get your Bitcoin. It's one of those things where you don't need to be accessing it from the exact same computer. You just have specific login information that would be almost impossible to hack, because it's like a 12-word phrase that you would use to get into your account. And you can have what is called a cold wallet, which is like having a memory stick or some other device that you plug in. And unless that thing is plugged in, you cannot then access a Bitcoin wallet. And it pretty much prevents people from monitoring you signing in and learning your login information. It's pretty airtight. And the fact that we'd be talking about the government having to shut down the internet to stop you means that they really can't do it. That's like saying, like, what happens? That's like it's talking about gold. And like, what happens if the government just blows up your house? It's like, I guess then you're done.
Yeah, the other point is, if the government shuts down the entire internet, well, then Bitcoin's the least of your problems right now, because all the internet's gone down. So yeah, I mean, that's a pretty extreme example. Like, if there's an EMP and all the electricity is out, well, then Bitcoin isn't currency like seeds, and guns are currency. So
100% also still have money in like housing, and have money in stocks and like other sort of actual assets. Like there are some of the weird people you bump into who they think they can live on Bitcoin and eat it, and they don't need anything else but it. But most people that we talked to at the conference, they're like, yeah, no, I have a little bit of my money in this, a little bit of my money in that. And it's more so just hey, if all goes wrong, I still have access to a bunch of my money through Bitcoin. And that's kind of the beauty of the whole thing. It's not something that has to become your entire financial life. It's just some little extra attachment that keeps you safe.
So why not the golden standard? All right. So listen, I'm not against the gold standard, and a lot of you might be, quasi-libertarian or whatever. And that since the US dollar was taken off the gold standard in 1971, inflation has gone rampant and purchasing power of the dollar has plummeted because it's now fiat currency. And, what money used to be is like a dollar bill was essentially portable gold, right? The good thing about gold is it's a hard asset. So countries used to need to have gold reserves that you could borrow against, and it would be a real thing, and blah, 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 blah. It was more secure because you couldn't just print money to infinity, because you needed the gold to back it. So it kept everything kind of in check. And I'm not against the gold standard. The Bitcoin as a reserve currency argument would go, okay, so problem A for Canadians is Canada sold off all its gold reserves. So if you go to the gold standard, Canada is now Zimbabwe. Like we suck. We're poor. So the argument for the Bitcoin standard is Bitcoin is essentially a better version of gold in the modern sense, because if you go, what is money? Money is as I say, it's a psychotechnology that quantifies value, right? And the problem with money printing in the current way our government works is we just overprint the money. So what the actual value of the money is totally out of, this is the government of Canada, right? So it's totally out of whack with what the value is. And Bitcoin being scarce, it kind of resets its value. So yes, it's good that money was originally portable gold, and gold is a hard asset, so you could have it. The problem is it's hard to just keep a bunch of gold in your pocket. And then you go to the store, throw some gold coins or silver coins, and then they chop it up and give you your change that way. It's impractical, right? It's just totally impractical for the modern world. Whereas Bitcoin, especially with the Lightning Network now, you can actually transact the amount of Satoshis, which is denomination of Bitcoin. Like, Bitcoin's about $40,000. So, if you're buying something for, you're buying a car for half a Bitcoin, let's say, you don't have to hold a coin. Like, you could just do it ding on your wallet, security phrase, authentication that way. It's a way that you don't need another system put in, like where money becomes the gold, but then they remove the gold from the money. So now what the hell is money these days?
Yeah, well, and the whole point of Bitcoin as well is not only is it a limited supply, but you don't have a central government who can arbitrarily say, okay, well, now whatever we print or whatever we have is worth half of much as what we had before. Because the only one thing I had some people telling me at the conference, like, well, the fiat currencies in the US and Canada and all over the place, they went bad because they got off the gold standard. I'm like, in my mind, it's like, that's a bad argument, because the government could have just arbitrarily started reducing the amount of gold each dollar represented, and you could still create inflation however you wanted. You could still print and just say each dollar is now worth a slightly different amount of gold over time. But it's just I just think it's a bad framing. But on the other hand, Bitcoin still solves the problem, regardless of how you frame it, is that everyone's kind of already agreed to what the value tends to be, and it's just pegged to the amount of demand on Bitcoin, and that's it. There's no way of someone artificially inflating demand. Like, demand can be inflated based on certain world events, but that's not the exact same thing as someone arbitrarily saying it's something else other than what, like, the value is agreed to by every single person in the world through their interactions with it.
Okay. So I put a link to the Twitter space that the National Telegraph is holding the Bitcoin conference, and then our Bitcoin finance columnist will be there, so we have better answers to these questions. Also, Ben Dichter, the Convoy spokesperson and an actual Bitcoiner, who raised the money for the Convoy in Bitcoin, will be there. So if you want to ask these questions directly to Ben or to Neil, they'll be in that Twitter space at 9 p.m. So we can keep going on this. I just want to let everyone know you'll get better answers if you go to that space. So you can set a reminder for it. Is Lightning Network used, for instance, if TAT wanted to pay its staff directly? We're not like paying staff in Bitcoin yet. It could be. It could be, but the Lightning Network is sort of now, I think, used more for transactions. Like, the Lightning Network is sort of equivalent to a credit card system. Like, that's the speed.
I'm just waiting for you to read the BL comment, and then I'm going to move on.
Did.
I'm not even going to acknowledge it because
I saw you smiling. So.
Yeah. Anyways, I just wanted to move on maybe from the CBDCs, other than the fact that the last comment I maybe want to make on it is that with CBDCs, I think it's important that we're probably going to be starting up an initiative on this, trying to gather, information on people in terms of like email information, and start up a list so that we can actually deliver people up-to-date information on the Liberals' plans on CBDCs, put pressure on politicians, put pressure on other media outlets to start talking about it, because it's one of those things where I find even independent media, you'll see them only talk about something when something's like about to be implemented and it's kind of too late. Whereas what we want to do is years before they actually attempt to put CBDCs in a trial run in any city, we should already be standing up against it and trying to get politicians on the record, whether they're in favor of it or against it, and going after those who for some reason are insane enough to be in favor of it. I guess that's my last comment on that.
Yeah, we want to see that our what TNT we're trying to do is we're trying to figure out a system to sort of cut them off at the pass and be proactive. And listen, if we're successful, the media will make us look like crazy conspiracy theorists. Like, oh, look, the National Telegraph, they were crazy. They were complaining about CBDCs, but they were never implemented. Great. If we're the ones complaining about something that never happened, great. Like, we know they tried to implement it. We saw it in the budget. And if the way they're going to stop us is to not do it so they can call us a crazy conspiracy theory website, fine. I'd rather be called conspiracy theorists than live in a country that has central bank digital currencies. So let's talk about the Conservative Party race, because you're going to cover. We did this episode rather early in the day because Wyatt needs to go cover the Poilievre shindig in Calgary. So the race is heating up. Poilievre has come out against CBDCs. The National Telegraph asked him that question. So good job on us. What a great news site. Remember to like, share, subscribe, push all the buttons because we are the best and everywhere else is terrible. Commies, all of them. So Poilievre is kicking butt. Jean Charest has gone insane. Jean Charest sounds like a crazy old man yelling at clouds. Patrick Brown supported a terrorist organization. I am so surprised that would happen.
I like how this isn't even a stretch or like hyperbole.
How could this happen? I never expected Patrick Brown or anyone affiliated with Patrick Brown to be in support of terrorism. This is my surprised voice. I am so surprised how this could happen. Why did this happen? I have no idea. No idea. Anyway, and then Leslyn Lewis is doing the Leslyn Lewis thing of just be very, very, very boring, very, very, very under the table. Hit up those churches, talk to the church leaders, just stay in the churches, stay very safe, not do anything, not make any noise, not fight back, not be counter thing. And she'll do second place by being conservative, but she'll never win because she's too afraid to.
I honestly, at this point, I don't think she can even win second place. Like, I even like generally Leslyn Lewis's character as a person. I think she could actually do very well inside the party, but she needs to learn how to land a punch. We're like seeing Leslyn Lewis is like seeing Rocky at like the very start of the film, except it's been like 4 films of Rocky just getting beaten up by Spider Rico at some random church bar or whatever. It's just been that with Leslyn Lewis. I'm only going to make bad analogies on this show. That's just how it is. But like, I still want her to actually finally like land a punch on Trudeau or one of the other leadership candidates without meandering around for 20 minutes before she says, and whatever you were doing was bad. It's the problem with every social conservative who gets into politics is that they have people around them saying, don't go hard. You're just trying to be very nice and very socially conservative, but not out loud, just very quiet. And that's it. And that's what ticks me off about Leslyn's campaign, even though I'd actually like her to do very well in this race and even give Pierre a run for his money. And I'm not sure really who I'd want to win between the two. I just want a tight race so that they sort of end up, whoever wins adopts the best policies from each other's campaigns. But right now, that's probably not going to happen with Leslyn Lewis unless she kind of gains a little bit of energy.
Yeah, it's like it. Listen, I love the SoCons. I'm not one myself. They like me. I like them. We get along. But they suck at Canadian politics. They suck. They're just bad. They're not winners when it comes to Canadian politics. Because again, they do the thing of like, you know what? Leslie, you know how to appeal to people? Appeal to us. Like, there's no way they like, and when they do try, and then they get into like, then Andrew Scheer, the SoCon, like gets the SoCon support, and then to be in the general, he's all confused, so he stabs the SoCons in the back. So they don't even get anything they wanted, right? So the SoCons never even get any social conservatism out of their candidates because they're not good at doing this. But it's exactly what you said. It's like she's being told by all the church leaders who are very nice people to act like you're in a church, not like you're in a political party race.
Yeah. And you get to is that I think what happens, and this is where you could kind of blame people other than the candidates themselves for this, is that I think what happens is that they start to act, that they see other SoCon candidates, because to be fair, even though I'm a social conservative, there's a lot of SoCon candidates out there who are extremely eccentric, and you don't want to exactly act like them. Like there's the Joseph Borgalt guy running in this race, who's like some random guy from Saskatchewan. Like I know he's done some like notable things, but at the same time, he really shouldn't be the leader of a party. He talks way too much about the WEF. I hate the WEF. You hate the WEF. The whole point is if you talk about them 90% of your campaign, you probably don't understand the issues of the race. And he also looks like the guy that Willem Dafoe chokes out in Spider-Man 2002. I had to bring up that photo just for the record. But yeah, like you should watch that scene. It's fantastic. It's uncanny how much he looks like him. But I think Leslyn Lewis then responds by seeing extremely eccentric, socially conservative candidates by saying, I'm going to act like a red Tory who happens to secretly be socially conservative.
Yeah, and like you need to make some waves and get people talking about you. The only reason she did so well in the last leadership race is because everyone who paid attention was really conservative, hated O'Toole and McKay, knowing that they were fake, right? So she got that, oh look, she could be electable, she's actually conservative. Well, right now there's other conservative options in the race. Like people who like want a non-red Tory go to Poilievre, because Poilievre is out there saying things like, here's the thing on housing, here's the thing on inflation, here's the thing. He's going out there and he's on the offense, where Leslyn Lewis can't just sit there, be quiet, do nothing, and absorb the anti-Poilievre vote from the red Tories will go to Charest and Patrick Brown, and the anti-red Tory vote will go to Poilievre because he's sucking it up. Like, what's her market is her problem.
I always thought that it was the argument in her favor was kind of insulting, where they're saying we should put her as the leader because during a leadership debate, wouldn't it be great to have the conservative leader be a black woman? And like, I have never met Leslie Lewis, but I'd assume that she'd find that insulting too. Like, I'd rather her have good debate skills and just beat Trudeau rather than saying, we put a symbol on the stage and now Trudeau has to be embarrassed because of his blackface scandal. I don't think that it's too simplistic an idea to actually be true in reality. There's too many different factors other than the media. Like, what do you think? The media is going to collapse as soon as the debate starts. Like, oh my goodness, Trudeau's debating a black woman. This means that he sucks now. And it's like, Anime Paul was on the stage and it really didn't help her. If she literally was like attacked the entire like federal election by the media as being a terrible leader, it did not work out. Even though she was actually a pretty good leader, her party is just anti-Semitic.
Yeah. So you've already seen the media ignore a black woman if she doesn't fit like all the intersectional capabilities that one fits. And, you know, to an extent, I understood the argument last time, like, hey, look, the Canadian media is paying so much attention to Kamala Harris down south and just basically praising her for being a black woman and existing. And wow, isn't it so amazing that Kamala Harris stepped foot in Montreal, blah, 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 blah. At the same time, ignoring an actual black leadership candidate, like a black woman running for leader in our country in Leslyn Lewis. So I kind of got that. My problem with Leslyn, though, is say something and force the media to pay attention to you. Right now, Leslyn Lewis is too easy to ignore, which means we should probably transition off of her and to the other candidates. So, dude, should we start with Poilievre and what he's doing right now, or go to the Patrick Charest?
I think just go to Pierre Poilievre, because Patrick Charest and Jean Brown really don't matter, in the sense that everything that they're doing that's noteworthy has to do with Pierre Poilievre. So let's get Poilievre out of the way. And I think this is something that sort of goes against Leslie Lewis as well. Is the reason why Pierre Poilievre is doing so well is the perception that he's really earned this, that he's sort of the guy who's kind of deserves to be leader at this point, where every single other person that we've sort of seen, the last two people we saw be leader, Andrew Scheer and Aaron O'Toole, it was like, I guess these guys are leader now. It was never that weird, like, it was never that sort of feeling where, okay, it doesn't matter how many people are, this is the person who should be leader. Whereas Pierre Poilievre has that sort of feeling around him where, unless you do something screwy or you just are really good at selling memberships, this is the guy that the membership of the party wants, because of all of his, like, sort of his loyalty over time, while also kind of keeping his integrity intact. I wouldn't agree with every vote Pierre's made, but you can generally say that 8 out of 10 times he's been in the right, whereas the average conservative is probably more like a 4 out of 10.
Yeah, and this is what I've said to the conservatives over the years, is like, just say something, fight for one conservative value. Pierre fights for a little bit more, but you'll attract a following like Pierre has done by taking on certain things. Now, there's a lot of PPC people who will rightfully start pointing out, hey, where was Pierre on lockdowns, vaccine passports, and mandates? He kind of went along with the whole thing. Now, my defense of Pierre Poilievre, and it's not really a defense, but it's more my analysis here, as putting on the TNT hat, is okay. If he defended a anti-mandate position or anti-lockdown position, you have to know how Canadian politics work. At the time that all this COVID stuff is going on, Aaron O'Toole was the leader. And to be conservative when Aaron O'Toole was the leader of the Conservative Party means you would have lost your job. So had Pierre stood up for freedom, he would have gotten kicked out of caucus, and then he wouldn't be able to run for leader.
Pierre was already demoted for just simply being slightly more conservative than Aaron O'Toole. He was made the labor and jobs minister instead of finance minister.
Yeah, so he already had been demoted and punished by O'Toole-led party for being better than O'Toole. So he would have got kicked out. Now, I'm the type of guy who would, listen, vote. You guys, I should, they'll never let me. But hypothetically, I should run for MP of the Conservative Party in a safe riding, become a Conservative MP, and then, guys, place your bets on how long it takes me to get kicked out of the Conservative Party for being myself. I think 15 minutes, but the over-under would be 1 month. Can I last 1 month inside the party before they kick me out for being too based? That would be interesting. So, that's me, and I think that's all to you, but can we hold everyone to this standard? It is one thing. So, in a sense, does Pierre have the excuse of, listen, guys, O'Toole was so terrible that had I stood up for you, I would have get kicked out of the party. And I did a lot of work behind the scenes, and there was a lot of pushback, because there was a lot of pushback we were hearing towards the O'Toole leadership within the party. So we did hear that. Now it's impossible to know, like, was it led by Pierre? We don't know. There's a lot of things, that did go on behind the scenes that we just aren't privy to. But this would be the Poilievre defense if he could say it in private. So we'll make it for him here. But yeah, I think it is also legitimate criticism of there too. So Poilievre is really connecting. Like he's making videos about housing, he's making videos about inflation. And as I've said, his superpower is he has the skill of political theater. Like he knows how to make people, like there's very few politicians in Canada where people would watch a 3-minute video of them talking. Right? For 95% of the Canadian Parliament, the only way I could get you to watch a 5-minute video of them talking is to literally point a loaded gun at your head and say, you have to watch this or else I will shoot you. Like that's the only way you'll watch 5 minutes of Aaron O'Toole talk about anything. is if I make
honestly it was hilarious. While he was the leader, I think he had fewer clips than Andrew Scheer in the same time period. Like Andrew Scheer was the leader longer, but it seemed like when Andrew Scheer was leader, every other day he'd have a clip coming out of him slamming the Liberals. When Aaron O'Toole was the leader, it was like he'd maybe say something every 2 weeks or something like that. It would be the most like limp thing I've ever heard.
Yeah, it was always like, you pointed this out. This is the thing you would always say is it was something like, it's not that the Liberal policy is flawed. It's just the execution is flawed. So you would never say the Liberals are philosophically wrong about anything. They're just, they're just mean and they wear blackface, where Aaron O'Toole could do it better. So that was his problem. And so you have Pierre Poilievre, who's drawing massive crowds all throughout Canada. And it really is something to see. Like Pierre Poilievre is more of a rock star politician in a way than Justin Trudeau 2015. It's hard to remember. Like Trudeau was rather popular in 2015.
Trudeau was like, TikTok wasn't around, but he was like TikTok popular even back then, in the sense that it's very vapid. It's just some like 15-year-old girl putting together like clips of him where he doesn't even speak over some pop songs she likes. There was never like a moment where people were like delving into the thought of Justin Trudeau. He was just some sort of like symbol more so of change. And that was kind of it. Where Pierre Poilievre, someone who people will sit down and watch an hour-long video of him doing an interview, because he's legitimately an interesting guy in the way he sort of tackles Canadian politics and he thinks about the policies the Liberals are passing and his critique of them. Whereas, and I think we can move on to the other candidates, the other guys that are running, it's kind of the exact same Aaron O'Toole pitch with like a little bit more polish. It's just sort of saying, I've done a couple of important things, but they're more important than Aaron being like the Veterans Affairs Minister for like 5 minutes. And that's kind of where we get to like Jean Charest. And I think it's also notable that their entire campaign so far are just whatever they say against Pierre Poilievre and has nothing really to do with their own policy.
Yeah, I mean, John Strait just released some sort of childcare thing where it's a Liberal policy of we're going to spend tons of money, print a bunch of money, and pay you to have kids to, cause hyperinflation. Like because
that's always reverse birthing rates.
Yeah, that's the other thing. So yeah, Charest's now resorted to free money. Like that's his new attack against Poilievre. As Poilievre's, he tried to get him on the trucker thing. By the way, we were totally right when I wrote the article. Like he's trying to paint himself as the anti-convoy guy. The next day he goes on a rant about the convoy and pushes all the mainstream media lies about it. And then Patrick Brown's plan to gain the leadership of the Conservative Party is to ally himself with the Tamil Tigers. Bold strategy. We'll see how that one pays off.
And just for how people know, it's not like the Tamil Tigers are currently listed as a terrorist organization in Canada for like a technicality kind of a reason, like the Proud Boys are listed as a domestic terrorist organization. The Tamil Tigers in Sri Lanka kind of murdered like over 6,000 people, just so people know. But, don't tell Patrick Brown, he might get upset.
But Patrick Brown's going to go further. Not only is he going to take them off the terrorist watch list, he's also going to apologize to them. This is his grand strategy. So
did he actually say that, or was that like, is that just a joke? What? Okay, never mind.
I'm pretty sure I saw that on his thing. Like, no, I think that was Patrick Brown. Like, it's past time. Let me go.
I guess taking them off the terrorist watch list, you better apologize, or you're just admitting, yeah, they don't deserve an apology, but I'm going to take them off anyways.
Yeah, it's Okay, the first thing is a thing.
His campaign's been extremely embarrassing because you and I, both independently now, have heard from several people that the only reason Patrick Brown is in this race is because Jean Charest is going to prop him up and try and make him the leader. Like that Patrick Brown is kind of just the non-entity here, and Jean Charest is going to try and attack Pierre Poilievre and then push people over to voting for Patrick Brown, and somehow like Charest is going to deliver up Quebec for Patrick Brown. That's like we've both heard that from like several people, and like I'm still not getting where Patrick Brown's going to sort of become the second place guy here. He's kind of just been floundering a lot. Like he has decent sized rallies, but I'm still not seeing what's really going to launch him into anywhere here.
This is my favorite. This is my favorite. Do you say the Hamilton Tiger Cats? That's clever. That's clever. You get 3 extra grains of rice per day in the gulag for that one, Karen. Hamilton Tiger Cats. Oh,
but like, do you see the path here for Patrick Brown? Considering that we both heard that supposedly he has a big path.
Yeah, I mean, Patrick Brown's path is if all the people he signs up that are never going to vote conservative actually do vote. So if he can get the Tamil Tigers, if he can get the Calistanis, if he can get all the Muslim Brotherhood organizations, if he can get then like the coalition of red Tories, then Charest sort of drops out and gives him Quebec, and he gets all the different if you can really win over like all the radical quasi-terrorist organizations and their supporters, and then merge them with the red Tories, which I don't think is really possible, and then get some funny numbers in Quebec, and of course some help from inside the party. Could he beat Pierre Poilievre in the 10th round? Yeah, maybe. I just think Poilievre's too popular right now. It would also have to be Poilievre sort of petering out and all of his supporters just thinking he's going to win, so they don't really show up, and only 80% instead of 100% show up, or whatever the numbers are. There is sort of a pathway for Brown coming on. Again, this is a long race,
So far, our predictions have actually been pretty on point, because I think we both said that we heard that Patrick Brown was going to run like months before he actually announced, or people were even rumoring it. And then you were correct, because the Toronto Star reported the exact same things people were saying inside the party, that Jean Charest doesn't really care about.
So I'm on record on February 28th talking about the meeting between Charest and Brown, and I think.
And then you did like an article like the next day or so, and then
on the 3rd, and then the Toronto Star did an article on the 9th. And that was the thing on the Charest Brown thing. But if
I was just going to say on top of that as well, I think literally that week you had mentioned that, and then on the show I then predicted that if they are going to try and beat Pierre, even though I still think Pierre's probably going to win, is that they have to absolutely flood the race with random people, just absolute nobodies who are going to attack Pierre Poilievre, call him rude or whatever, and then try to push votes in Eastern Canada over to Patrick Brown, Jean Charest, which seems to be happening with these like Atchison guys and like Dalton or whatever. And I hear some of them are slightly more to the right of Pierre, but at the end of the day, they're Eastern Canadian politicians who will push people towards Patrick Brown simply because I think they're going to try and paint Pierre Poilievre as like the great evil that they have to stop because he's not moderate enough, he's not a leader, or blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, I mean, it would have to be, again, sort of for everything to line up for Patrick Brown, things would have to at least start the way they've started, with his campaign going a bit better. But with Jean Charest, again, Jean Charest would have to stoke up all the anger right now, because there's a lot of anger within the conservative movement at Jean Charest, because he's taken a shot at the convoy, he's taken shots at Pierre Poilievre, he's dragging Poilievre down into a fight, and all that everyone sees like the red Tory, the left-wing candidate in the race is Jean Charest. So he is able to paint himself to the right of someone, right? This way he doesn't have to support the convoy. He just has to not throw the convoy under the bus until he gets prime minister and then throws the convoy under the bus, right? So he will be able to portray himself as the moderate candidate in the race, and his pathway to victory is second place votes. So again, as you said, flooding the race with candidates, having those candidates get in fights with Pierre Poilievre, so the people who support them don't rank Poilievre as their second place choice in the ballot. They go, okay, well, Brown could be my second place choice, whatever. And then people aren't from Ontario, so they don't know how bad he is. This is kind of, how it's turning out. And, Charest will flame up, burn out, and then a lot of the mainstream support should shift to Patrick Brown, like all the Globe and Mail editorials. They will eventually go to Brown over Charest, I do believe. So yeah, is there a pathway to victory for the Tamil Tigers? Yeah, there is.
You mean
But
the Hamilton Tiger Cats?
the Hamilton Tiger Cats. Yeah, like I do think there still is a possibility that Patrick Brown can pull it off. But I think Poilievre's looking pretty good. You just hope he doesn't peak too early. Yeah.
I just want to make a prediction right now that once there is a debate, Jean Charest and Pierre is going to attack Pierre Poilievre. They're going to get into a scuffle. Jean Charest is going to be ranting so much that you can't even hear what Pierre is saying, and just sounds like a big pile up. And then Patrick Brown's going to come in here and be like, "Hey guys, shouldn't we just unify because I'm the second place candidate that everyone should mark on their ballots?" There's going to be that moment where like it's going to be like basically like as close as you can get to like a coordinated staged attack where Charest goes after him, and then Patrick Brown tries to be the unifier at the very end who wants everyone's second place votes.
Yeah, that's very likely. Yeah, that's the thing. And like, I'm with you. Like, we don't need a moderate candidate. Now you need an actual conservative candidate. But I think people are so wise to the game. Another problem is the plan that the elites inside the party have, in a sense, is very antiquated because their thinking is antiquated. So that's your one saving grace, is they don't really understand the modern world, which is good. And other than that, yeah, I think that's pretty much the stuff in the race. So I'll give you the last word. You need to get going to make it to the Poilievre rally, and you need to eat something and get there. So we'll close out, and I just will let people know that, thanks for liking, sharing the video, blah, 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 blah. The National Telegraph will be hosting a Twitter space at 9 p.m. tonight. So if you want to learn more about the Bitcoin conference, and we will be having the Freedom Convoy spokesperson, Ben Dichter, is going to be there. There is a new wave to the Freedom Convoy. We talked to him there, but if you didn't see it, there will be a Delta variant of the Freedom Convoy. It will have a lot to do with Bitcoin and Bitcoin funding. So if you want to learn more about the future of the Freedom Convoy and the second wave, the Delta variant, if you will, feel free to come by our Twitter space tonight, join, ask questions, all that. So should we post a link to the National Telegraph Twitter?
Sure. And then while you're doing that, I'm going to get the last word in just because I want to promote something I did today. But of course, Facebook will never reward this content. So I'll also post the link after you're done that one. But I just wanted to talk about the Liberals' insane housing policy for like 2 minutes. So basically, I'm not sure if anyone knows this, but when housing prices are skyrocketing, don't print money and dump money into the housing market. That surprisingly does not reduce the amount of houses, like the prices of homes, and it doesn't incentivize more people to build homes, even if you call it affordable housing, like money earmarked for that. It's stupid. The problem in Canada, if houses are in your area,
super affordable housing.
Yeah, I know. Like if you just call it if you just make positive sounding titles, eventually they work. I've been told that in a class I never took or paid attention to. But if you're living in Vancouver and you need $2 million to get a down payment on a crack shack, it has nothing to do with excessive profiteering like the Liberals are talking about. It has to do with the fact that your city council sucks. They're insane. They've probably made it so that you can only build an oddly specific type of housing in oddly specific areas, and you have to take a minimum of 6 years of paperwork to even start breaking dirt, to even start digging and laying down a foundation. That's why housing is extremely expensive, but the Liberals, and especially Chrystia Freeland, who's currently our finance minister, has no clue how housing works. So their plan is to just inject literally $10 billion into the housing market, $4.5 billion in Indigenous housing, because we can't get any more paternalistic than we currently are, but Chrystia Freeland has found a way. And yeah, I think it's ridiculous, and more people should know about how bad the Liberals' housing policy is. So I just dropped the link in the chat.
Yep. So there's Wyatt's article on housing markets. If you want to check that out, please do. Wyatt, eat dinner, then go cover the Poilievre event. So if you want to see tomorrow, I think we'll have some videos up of the Poilievre event. And if you want to join us at 9:00 on a Twitter space, a special guest, Ben Dichter, Freedom Convoy spokesperson, will be there answering questions about anything you have there. So see you guys at 9 p.m. or see you next week. And usually this will be at 9 p.m., but Wyatt had to go cover the thing, and we wanted to get that in. So thanks everyone for coming. Like, share, subscribe, blah, 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 blah. You know how to internet. We will see you